everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We are so excited. We are the Novel Neighbor. We are a local independent bookstore in St. Louis, Missouri in the Webster Groves neighborhood. We sell all genres of books and carefully curated gifts that for any reader, for any readers, little readers, etc. Tonight we are talking about April Henry's new book, Two Truths and a Lie. We are so excited. I'm going to introduce Wendy Heard, who April's in conversation with, as well as April, and then I will pass the mic to them. And again, my name is Cassie. You can answer or ask any questions that you have in the comments. We'll be doing a Q&A at the end, and we'll put banners up throughout. But remember, ask your questions in the comments. So first up, Wendy Heard is our conversation partner. Wendy Heard is the author of the acclaimed YA novel She's Too Pretty to Burn, which Kirkus Reviews praised as a wild and satisfying romp in a starred review, as well as two adult thrillers, The Kill Club and Hunting Annabelle. She is the member of Sisters in Crime and International Thriller Writers and Mystery Writers of America, and is a contributor at crimereads.com and Writer's Digest. Wendy lives in Los Angeles, California. Wendy, thank you so much for being with us tonight. And Lady of the Hour, we have April Henry. April Henry is the New York Times bestselling author. She knows how to kill you in 24 different ways. She makes up for a peaceful childhood in an intact home by killing off fictional characters. There was one detour on April's path to destruction. When she was 12, she sent a short story about a 6-foot-tall frog who loved peanut butter to noted children's book author Roald Dahl. And he liked it so much that he showed it to his editor, who asked if she could publish it in Puffin Post, an international children's magazine. And by the time April was in her 30s, she had started writing about hitmen, kidnappers, and drug dealers. She has published 26 mysteries and thrillers for teens and adults, with more to come. She is known for meticulously researching her novels to get the details right. I will bring Wendy on screen and I will bring April on screen. Thank you both so much for being here. We're so excited to have you. And with that, I'm going to pop off. Wendy and April are going to take the show, and we'll see you at the end. Remember to ask your questions in the comments.
April, we're so excited. Congratulations on your newest book, Two Truths and a Lie. It might be backwards.
Well, I should say congratulations on your newest book, Dead End Girls. Like I said on Twitter, I was reading it on the plane, and even though I had been up for 19 hours, I could not stop reading it. It is so good.
Well, thank you. And the same thing happened to me. I got sent your book by our publisher, and the next thing I knew, it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I wasn't sleeping, and I was like, I have to know what happens. Well, thank you. I think you are going to do a little reading for us. Am I right?
I'm going to do a super short reading.
Okay. What part of the book is this from?
I'm just going to read from the very first page of the book, chapter 1.
Okay.
Called Look Where You Want to Go, Friday, 2:40 p.m. Shotgun, I shout as Mrs. McElroy pulls up to the curb. Through some mysterious magic known only to her, Mrs. McElroy has been able to wheedle use of a school district vehicle this weekend. Normally, only the athletic teams, we theater kids lump them together as sports ball, get that kind of support. So we'll be traveling to the theater competition at the state capitol in style. That is, if your idea of style is a tan minivan. No fair, Mom, Raven pouts. The nickname got started last fall when I brought enough treats to make the week prior to opening night, better known as Hell Week, more bearable. Hey, the adults always sit in the front seat, Adam says, opening the back gate. All 5 of us try to jam our suitcases into the small luggage space until he takes charge. As Adam fits all the suitcases together like puzzle pieces, something soft and cold dots the tip of my nose. I look up, flakes are falling from the concrete gray sky. With a grin, my best friend Min tips her head back and sticks out her tongue to catch one. Maybe I look anxious because Adam says, "Don't worry, Nell," as he slots a backpack into a gap. It won't stick. The forecast says just a few flurries. We haven't gotten much snow this winter, at least by Midwest standards. My family moved here from Los Angeles a little over a year ago, so the snow is still sort of a novelty. I had imagined pristine drifts, snowmen, and snowball fights. The reality has been a lot less picturesque. In a corner of the parking lot, just like all parking lots around here, there's a head-high, dingy gray pile. With each passing week, it gets a little dirtier and a little smaller. Now it's spring, at least on paper. Beep, beep. Mrs. McElroy honks the horn to hurry us up. Adam slides open the side door and then scrambles in, contorting his long legs to sit in the far corner. Everyone else follows. I pull the door shut and then take my seat in the front. Min starts immediately playing the Hamilton soundtrack on her phone. Well, she has by far the best singing voice. We all sing along at full volume and with dramatic gestures. Everyone's excited about competing and even about the trip to the capital. To them, it's a big city. The nearest actual big city is Chicago, and that's the better part of a day's drive away. As Mrs. McElroy pulls out of the parking lot, we ignore the stares from the kids waiting for their parents or the bus. Or maybe we don't. All of us love an audience. It's kind of a given if you're an actor. I'm not sure one minivan can contain all this energy, Mrs. McElroy says in a pause between songs, but she's grinning when she says it. We all live, sleep, and breathe theater. For many of us, theater is our truest family, sometimes our only family. Theater is the place where being weird is embraced, not shunned. We know what we're like when we're stripped of everything, both literally and figuratively, and yet we still love one another. So they're on their way to a big theater competition, and a blizzard is going to blow in, and they are going to have to stop at a creepy old motel, and things are going to go terribly wrong.
Super wrong.
Super, super wrong.
Can I ask you a question about the dedication to this book?
Yeah. It is dedicated. Okay, so in 2019, it all started in real life. In 2019, I was at a literature conference in the Midwest, and I was the keynote speaker, and I had given my talk, and I went to go sign in the signing room, and there wasn't anyone in there. And I thought I had gotten lost because this hotel had been added onto over time, and it had a super confusing layout. So I went wandering around trying to figure out where I was supposed to be, and I ended up in the lobby where I saw everyone was leaving. They were all fleeing because they all lived in this state, and they had heard that a blizzard was going to come in. And so the only people who are going to be left in this weird old motel were people who were from out of state and who had flown there. So I put out some sad tweet because they were saying we were going to be there for 3 days, and the hotel only served breakfast. I still have a little tiny bag of oatmeal that I stole because I thought maybe I could eat it if I got desperate. But I put out a tweet about how we were going to be stuck there. And this lady who is an elementary school teacher, so not even my grade level of people, she didn't even know me. She said that she had 4-wheel drive, and she offered to give me a ride and as many people who needed a ride to the nearest town. And we ended up driving for hours and hours, and we ended up getting to a bigger town, and we were the only people on the road. I think she probably regretted it as soon as it got, to me, it was very scary. Like, there was no one around. The wind is blowing the snow. You can't see anything. The whole cabin of her car is completely silent. There were 5 of us. And she made it. And she actually they closed the freeway. Like, they do that. They will put a gate across it or something, because there had been a 90-car accident right after we got off of it. So they closed it down, and she was stuck in this town with us. And she had a newborn. We actually had to go to Walmart so she could buy a breast pump, because you need, if you're nursing, you need to get rid of that milk. And if you don't have your baby, you're going to need to get rid of it some way, or it's extremely painful. But I dedicated it to her because I was like, Sarah Sell is a hero. She took me in when I was a stranger, and she saved me. So that's why the book is dedicated to her.
Wow. So did you you went to the nearest town and found a motel?
We found like a Hampton Inn, and it wasn't even the nearest town. It was the nearest big town with an airport. So I actually have a video because it had a motion sensor that would open the door automatically. Well, the wind was blowing so hard that it just kept closing and opening and closing and opening, and they couldn't figure out how to get it to stop because this blizzard out there was just crazy. Where I live, I don't even know what a blizzard was. You have to have, not only do you have to have snow, but you have to have a certain amount of wind for it to be considered a blizzard. If you want to read something terrifying, read about the children's blizzard of 1882 or something, where all these kids, it had a spring-like day. They didn't, like, wore a sweater to school, and then the blizzard came in, and kids just froze to death trying to walk home from school. That felt like that. It felt like we were in the children's
in this book.
What?
You mentioned the children's blizzard in this book.
Yeah, it was
Mhm.
there was just recently a novel came out about the children's blizzard, and it's really good. There's also some nonfiction books about the children's blizzard.
Wow. That is so interesting. I'm so glad I asked you about that. I read this intro and I was like, this must be a story. Wow. So that's what gave you the idea for this book then?
Yeah, immediately when I was still there, there's stuff that I used a lot of stuff about the actual hotel. But even when I was there, I tweeted the author Christopher Moore. We're like Twitter friends, but I was
Mhm.
like, I just stayed in this hotel and it is so creepy. And I'm going to do a book about a group of people trapped in a creepy old motel, and the one by one they die. And that's going to be my book. And I was writing it just a few months later. I just knew it was going to be a book. There were things that a lot of things made it into it, like it didn't have marked corridors and they had added on to it. So if you were, this is all in the book, if you were on the first floor, your rooms would either begin with a 1 or a 3, but there were no signs. So you
Mhm.
would just walk in circles around these endless corridors trying to find, and then like you would think you had already been someplace and all of a sudden there would be your room. Um, the doors slammed really hard. I didn't put this in the book, but I tried to catch a door because I was worried it was going to wake people up on my corridor, and I ended up just getting my hands slammed in the door. I'm really lucky I didn't break any fingers because I wouldn't have been able to go anyplace. Uh, it had identical paintings. In my room, there were 2 paintings that were the same, and then I started looking around the hotel, and they were every place. There was hundreds of identical paintings. It was like they had just bought all of them, and that was the only artwork they had there. I mean, I added some stuff on that wasn't in the hotel, but a lot of their that's in there, like the indoor tiki bar.
Tiki bar. Yeah, that was in there.
Yeah, that was it was the real one was called the elephant eye, but I called it the tiger tail. But
Mhm.
it was the whole place was really strange. You had to kind of see it to believe it.
Wow, that's so cool. I can't believe that. And do you like hear from anyone from that who that was there with you that they like immediately
Yeah, I
recognize?
stay in touch with Sarah, who drove us. I stay in
Mhm.
touch with Barbara, who's another author, Barbara Borenson, and Amory Stevens. Um, and then let's see, there was a lady from Ireland that I didn't stay in touch with as much, maybe just because of the time difference. We were all on WhatsApp together. We were trying to find
Mhm.
something we could all use that I think some of us had to download WhatsApp just so that we could stay in contact with each other because we were trying to figure out
Mhm.
what to do. And in this weird sprawling motel, just even when is she going to be there with her car? And who knows what we can do. So she's the only one. Bernadette is the only one I didn't stay in touch with from
Wow.
Ireland.
Well, so I think you took this adventure that you had and you turned it into this like locked room mystery thriller. You know what I mean? It's like a classic locked room thriller. I love those stories. So were you influenced by any locked room mysteries that you
You
might
know,
have
I've
read?
always liked even like I mean, going way back to Presumed Innocent. I remember I read that book again years later, knowing the answer, and I saw that he had left all the clues in there. I've always liked those locked room ones. I read while I was writing the book, I read The Hunting Party by Lucy Foley. It's kind of similar thing where there's a group that goes out hunting and somebody ends up dead. I
Mhm.
just I like it where there's not that many possible suspects and they're all there with you, and you're just all, I mean, anything like that I think is interesting, like a murder on a cruise ship or
Mhm.
a murder on a space station, anything where there's just a limited number of suspects.
I love that too. And I was making bets with myself, like, okay, on page 160, I think it's this person. I love doing that. It's so fun. It's like the whole fun of it, you know?
And
And then
then
I'll half
I
right, half wrong.
yeah, I tried to, I think that, well, you know this from writing. You know, we write kind of similar books, especially if you're going to write a mystery. I think that everyone has a secret and they'll do a lot to keep it a secret. It's just maybe not the secret. They're not the killer, but they just have something else they don't want other people to know about them. So they'll act in in, suspicious ways and lie and steal and cheat, but just to keep their secret a secret, not because they're the killer.
I'm literally writing this down right now. That's such a good way to say it.
I teach writing occasionally, so
I was gonna say, I was like, I knew I was gonna want this pen. I knew you were gonna say some things I was gonna want to write down for later. Because that's always how this goes. I always learn so much from someone, like when I'm talking to them back and forth like this, right? And you're like, I want to steal your tricks.
well,
Yeah,
I mean, when reading Dead End Girls, what made you come up with the idea for that? I was wondering because your book is about two girls who fake their own death. And I was wondering and they fake their own deaths in Hawaii. And I was wondering if you went to Hawaii and did you write it off for that book?
I always try to write about a place I've been, right? Like I don't really like to write about somewhere I've never been. I feel like if I've traveled there for a week or more, at least I can write something set there for a minute. I might not be able to write the experience of being a local, but at least I can write the setting, right? But if I've never even traveled somewhere, I don't really like to write it in a setting that's going to be more than like a very brief. Like I guess I could write in like driving through Dallas or something, even though I've never been in Dallas. But like I wouldn't want to write like 5 or 8 chapters in Dallas because
You'll get things wrong.
You get things wrong, and it sucks for the people who live there, right? I'm from LA, and everyone wants to write about LA and make movies about LA and stuff like that, and they get stuff wrong, and so I know what that feels like, right? So it's a nice I don't know. I just feel weird. So yeah, I've been to Hawaii a bunch of times, and in California, well, you're in Portland, right? So this is probably pretty common. People here go to Hawaii a lot because it's actually pretty cheap. It's right there. Yeah. So that's a pretty common tropical destination for us. So I had always felt like, people come from wealthy communities here in Southern California, and then they go to Hawaii and go to these resorts that look like exactly like what they just came from.
You talked about that, how it kind of replicates their experience at home, their insulated experience.
And I had lived in Orange County for like a year earlier in my life, and I always wanted to write about Orange County. My cousins live there, and we call it in LA, we call it going behind the orange curtain. Living behind the orange curtain is what we say, because it's so, you drive into Orange County and it's like you've entered a different world. It's very strange, especially coming from LA, where you it's only 20 miles or 40 miles away or something from, like, if you go from South LA to North Orange County, you're talking 10 miles. I mean, it's right there, but it's like a whole different world. And I don't know. I'd always wanted to write about some of that. And then especially South Orange County is like, what is happening? And it's beautiful too. That's the hard thing. And it's hard when you're, there. It's so beautiful by the coastline. And it sucks that it's like, it always feels like rich people get the coastline. Rich people get all of the prime areas, and poorer people have to go inland. And so being from LA and the coastal areas, you always feel kind of like you're just priced out of the best places. You get the crappy air and the smog and the exhaust and the inland. And so I think all of us here have sort of feelings about that, right? So it makes you want to write about it.
Yeah. Anything you feel strongly about, you should be writing about.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's fun. I don't know, what year were you writing this book in? Was it 2020?
2019 and 2020. The event happened in 2019. God, it's all such a big blur now. I probably did some rewriting in 2020. Yeah. Wait, what year is it? God, it's been so strange. So, I think I wrote I proposed it in 2019. I might not have started writing it until 2020. 2020 was just the strangest year. I mean, you take the plague. I got diagnosed with heart arrhythmia. I was actually on the wall of moms during the George Floyd protests, which was this very short-lived group. So I was on the wall of moms with a heart monitor glued to my chest. I was on this increasing amount of medication, which was totally not fun. But I had heart surgery last year, or heart procedure. It wasn't technically surgery, so that's all better. But 2020 was just really strange year. So I probably wrote, now that I think about it, even though I proposed it in 2019, I probably wrote most of it in 2020.
Because it's interesting. I was thinking about that. I have been thinking about what people wrote during the pandemic when they were locked in, right? Because I
Mhm.
feel like you either wanted to write something that talked about your experience of being locked in, or you wanted to write something to kind of like pretend you weren't, like
Right.
escapism. And I think I did escapism, but I was wondering if this was your pandemic book, if this was you writing about being locked in.
I think I knew I had the idea as soon as I was there, and that was February
Mhm.
2019, and
Yeah,
life was still quote normal then.
normal. Yeah.
But it was fun when I started trying to do the research for the book. I mean, I actually tried to find the map for that place because that motel was so strange. I could never find it online.
I have a
Like,
map in here, which is
yeah,
so
they
cool.
drew it. Oh, so that's my first book with a map. I think the map guy was sick of me because I was so clear in my head. Then I'd see it and I'd be like, "No, that's not it," and I would
Mhm.
explain it, and he would have to draw it again. But then I
I
started
love it.
looking. I wanted there to be an old murder in the book, like an
Yes.
unsolved murder. So I Googled like unsolved murder hotel. Don't ever Google that if you stay in hotels. Pretty much every single hotel has had an unsolved murder in it.
Mm.
Um, and there was one I actually based the old murder in the book on one that really happened in Iowa in
Okay.
1980, where it had a lot of twists in it that I didn't use, but this couple was found murdered, and there was writing on the mirror, but it was in soap, not in blood. But and all it said was the word "this," which it's hard to know what that was supposed to mean. But the guy who was murdered, his uncle was a serial killer who had, at the time of the murder, had escaped from a mental hospital, but I think it's just a coincidence. I don't think he killed them, but it was just a really weird coincidence. But
That's how many serial killers there were in those days, though. That's what it is. It's like there's so many now you're coincidentally blending them.
yeah, so it was just interesting to to think about, well, what could I steal from real life and stick in the book?
Always, right? I mean, I there's definitely things that I've been like, that's going in a book someday. Like I don't know where, but it's going in one of them someday, you know. And then they kind of, you bring them back and you use them.
Let's see. So did you was that point that you had your girls fake their own deaths by? Does that rocky area exist? Did you go to those beaches?
So I did almost, well, okay, if you asked my loved ones, they'd be like, "You did not almost die kayaking." Okay, I felt it was paddleboarding. I felt like I was gonna die paddleboarding because I was in this cove and it was like sweeping me out to sea. And I had my daughter sitting on the front of the paddleboard and I was like rowing for our lives to try to get us back. We did not almost die, but it gave me a lot of ideas. But then I'd always write about faking your own death. I think there's something so like interesting about faking your own death. Like
Mhm.
I think that there's something about it where it's like we want to say like, did she have a good enough reason to do that? And that those types of questions, like who does this? Why do they do it? And what would it take to actually get away with it nowadays? It's so hard with technology. Like, is it even possible?
Right.
To do it. So I'd always wanted to write about that. So I thought it would be fun to kind of mash ideas up.
Yeah, like cell phones have made it really hard to do like a lot of things that we like to do in thrillers. Like we want people to not be able to communicate. We don't want them to be able to look at a map and figure out where they are. We we don't want them to always be in contact with other people. It's changed. All the technology has changed a lot as to what's possible and what's not possible. I understand they updated all of the old Lois Duncan books and put cell phones in them, but I haven't read any of them.
Really?
Yeah, that they had just someone went through and stuck cell phones in there to try and make them more modern. I
You
did
know,
an
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was Lois Duncan riffing. I did an event with Gretchen McNeil, and
Mhm.
Lois Duncan was given her book to possibly blurb it, and she said it was too violent and refused.
How funny is that?
I
You're like,
felt
sorry.
it would be hard. I'd be upset.
Whew, yeah, that would sting, especially if you're like, it didn't seem that violent to me. I didn't mean to. I'm
Yeah,
sorry. Because thriller writers are usually actually really nice when you talk to them.
yeah, funny, kind.
Mm-hmm. My theory is we get it all out, so we don't have any
Mhm.
of it left.
My slogan is I kill people, but only on paper. It's
Mm-hmm.
not in real life.
Yeah, I was thinking about that cell phone thing, and I remember listening through this whole podcast series. I must have been, I don't know, I must have listened to like 10 hours of podcasting. And it was one of those like serial type of podcasts where we're going to figure out in real time, like this podcast is going to uncover and discover what happened, right?
Mhm.
I was really hooked in. I mean, they're talking about neighbors and boyfriends and
Right.
friends and acquaintances, and he's interviewing people. And the last episode, he just gets his hands on the dude's freaking Google like analytics from
Mhm.
the app on his phone and traces his phone at the murder time to the murder location, and he did it. And
Yeah,
it was so anticlimactic. I was like, I just listened to 10 hours of you interviewing strippers and like
right.
everyone in Hollywood, and like it just ended up being you traced his phone. So that's what we're up against, right? Is that such
Exactly.
a climax.
Yeah, or DNA or something where they're like, they'd be obvious to prove it or something. You have to kind of make it more complicated now.
Right. Or so I've been thinking a lot about like, so we're not removing things from crime scenes anymore because that's almost impossible. So maybe we're just adding evidence. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
adding.
Well, there was a guy who was put on trial for murder in Portland of
Mhm.
a plaid pantry clerk. They found the hat that he had been like it was a ski mask or something, and they found it in the bushes outside, and they found four people's DNA on it. And
Mhm.
they put on trial one of the people. That's the only one that they had knew who he was, but he was not convicted, which I think is correct because you
Mhm.
can't prove that he was the one who was wearing it. But maybe something like that, where you have more DNA on there, or the DNA got on there in an interesting way.
Mhm.
There's this, I think I've done this in the book. There's the idea transfer DNA. If I dry my
Mhm.
face on a towel and then you come around and you dry your hands on that same towel, you might pick up enough of my DNA. There was actually a case where someone what was put on trial for murder, and his DNA had transferred from a pulse oximeter. So he'd had a disease
Oh.
on his finger, and they were called to the scene of the murder, and they put a pulse oximeter on the dead guy, and they don't clean these things in between. And then they swab the dead man's hands for DNA and found the DNA from the last person who had the pulse oximeter, and he had a criminal record and a really bad memory because he kept saying, "I don't think I did it. I don't know." And if they hadn't figured out that he was in the hospital when the murder was committed, that he probably would have been convicted of that murder.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a pretty crazy story.
And then you have to tell that guy, just say, no, I didn't do it. Don't be like, I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, his lawyer kept saying, "Shut up."
Oh, but you know what? I mean, it just goes to show, like, I mean, he's like joking aside, he's probably not someone who can advocate for himself very well. He's probably not in of sound mind. And so many
Well, you
people.
look at a lot of people who are in prison. There's a lot
Yeah.
of leading people. They don't even mean to, but they feed them the what happened. Like, how did you kill her? And you've got somebody who's really suggestible, and they'll be like, "Oh, I strangled her," and they'll be like, "Oh, I don't know. Do you want to think about that?" Until they finally come up with the right answer. Um, when you're writing, how do you tend to write? Or did you plot this out in advance, or what did you do?
So I don't know about you. I don't know if you're like a plotter or they call it a pantser by the seat of your pants kind of thing.
I'm a plotzer.
You're a plotter.
No,
Okay. You
I'm a plotzer.
Oh, is that when you do both?
I do a little bit of both.
Oh, cool. Yeah, same over here a little bit. Like I'll know what the major beats are of the story,
Uh-huh.
but I won't write out all my scenes. I'll write my scenes up to like the next plot point. You know what I mean? Like if I'm starting the book, I'll jot down what my scenes will be to the inciting event. Then when I get to the inciting event, I'll like look at what I just did and I'll plot my scenes out to the break into two. You know what I'm saying? So I kind of go like one little piece at a time. How about you?
All right, it sounds like you're like working off a Save the Cat model kind of thing.
I do, but I kind of like have you I think it's similar, but like I'll do the 4 acts where it's like act 1, 2A, 2B, and
Uh-huh.
3. It helps me to break it up into 4 parts mentally. I think I just need like smaller chunks so it's not overwhelming.
Yeah, I'll usually have an idea for a book. So I was like, oh, I want to have a group of teens who are trapped. And then
Mhm.
I started trying to think, well, who's going to get trapped? Who travels? So I actually
Mhm.
asked on Facebook, and a bunch of teachers chimed in with like basketball teams travel, but then somebody said theater troops travel, and I was like, theater, oh, that would be ideal because actors lie and they're good at it. And then I got it was very expensive. There was um like a show, a little like film documentary about a theater competition that I spent
Oh
$50 for to get probably the only existing copy because
my
it's about
god.
20 years old. But I got this DVD of these kids going to a theater competition, and I actually tracked one of them down. She's an actress in Italy now, Melanie Noy. But so um, that's when I started thinking, well, what are some complications if they lied? And what are some things that they might know or be able to fool people, and what could come out of that? So I kind of had a rough outline of how I wanted to go. And then as I went along, then I would figure out things that I didn't know if they would work right. Like if there was a bond, how do I make it that not everybody, I don't want everyone to die. So how does that work? And luckily I found some lady on Twitter, Rachel Lance, who's an expert in bonds. So
Mm.
she was really helpful when I was asking all kinds of questions about how to make it so my people didn't die in the book.
I love that. Do you like research? I think you're a very thorough researcher.
I love research. I can get a little too down the rabbit hole. Like right now, I have a book where probably the bad guy is going to be a fracking company. So
Okay.
I have read so much about fracking and PFAS, and it's really not going to be a big part of the book. I just needed a villain, and it seemed like the
Love
fracking
it.
people would be good villains. But I feel like I'm probably spending too much time, I've read a bunch of nonfiction books, watched documentaries, and for something that doesn't take up a big part of the book. But I love the research part for this same book. I um, I wanted to have a plane crash, and so I found a private jet pilot who helped me figure out how to get the plane to crash.
Mhm.
And then I wanted because all the ideas that where he originally he was like, oh, do this. And I'm like, he was like, if you replace the regular fuel if you replace fuel with, if you put a car gas in there, the plane will stop working just in midair. And I
Mhm.
was like, oh, great. So then how would someone survive? And he was like, no, nobody survives. So I had to figure out, I had to work with him to figure out a way that I could get a character to survive because obviously I don't have a book if the plane crashes. And in this one, um, I just had to figure out how everything would work. I had a super bad map that I made myself that didn't look anything like that nice one they put in the book, um, just so I could figure out how all the pieces could fit together and who was doing what when.
I know this is silly, but one of my dreams, you know how we have these stupid author dreams? Like, I want a map in the front of my book. I have
This is
a
my first map. It's book 27, first map.
oh my god, it's so cool.
Yeah, and it was funny because Sarah, the person who drove us, I sent her a copy of the book, and she just sent me a note on Twitter, and she's like, "OMG, the map!" Exclamation point! Exclamation point! Because I'm sure she recognized it was our hotel.
Did she read it yet?
Yeah, I think she's reading it. Yeah, so I just messaged her to see how things were going with her, but yeah, I sent out copies to all my sources. Like one of them was an expert in theatrical hanging.
Mhm.
So he does everything from Peter Pan to flying a Dodge Ram Charger over a stadium to flying a bullet in a movie,
Mhm.
anything where something is suspended. So I talked to him right at the beginning of the pandemic. Oh, wait. So now I know when I was writing the book because that was the beginning of the pandemic. And he was at his house and
Uh-huh.
he had his Apple phone charging cord and a bottle of Hershey's chocolate syrup. And he was showing me how you could do a stage hanging. So,
I remember reading that and thinking, this sounds very realistic. Like this is clearly researched right here.
well, he actually went back to his place, which I don't think ever really closed down during the pandemic, and he took probably 50 photos and a bunch of videos and had them set up the whole thing. Do it with a bent spoon, put it in a track. He had a girl hang from it and took pictures of it the whole time and showed me how, like in a theatrical hanging, because unfortunately, if you Google theatrical hangings gone wrong or something, there's tons of people have decided that they can figure out how to make it look realistic and then they actually kill themselves on stage while everyone's like, it's so good, it really looks like it's happening, because it is. So
Oh, it's so scary.
with a correct one, they run a piece of like airline wire stuff into a rope, and then that runs down and has a hook on the end, and you're wearing a harness underneath your clothes, and it clips onto the back of your harness. It's kind of like a rock climbing harness, only on your shoulders. And they have a rope that goes around their neck, but it's just Velcroed onto the rope behind them. So even if something goes wrong, they're just suspended from their harness. There's never any weight on their throat. So he was just, I mean, he was super friendly. He didn't know me from anybody, but I find like if I email people and ask, they will help. Or if I just walk in and I'll be like, hey, I have a super weird question. Because I did that for the last book. I wanted to know if there was a piece on a typewriter you could snap off to use to pick your way out of handcuffs. And I just went to a typewriter store and said, I've got the weirdest question for you ever. And then we looked at a typewriter. I thought maybe you could use the key. The keys are really thick. You couldn't, but there's the ribbon vibrator, which I can't ever say at school because it just sounds bad. But there's the ribbon mover, and you can snap that off, and you could use it to pick your way out of handcuffs. So I didn't actually use it in the book, but I still put him in the book, and I still brought him a copy of the book when it came out.
I remember being like, I don't know how old, probably way too young, and reading this book by Christopher Pike in like the 80s. Do you remember
Oh
this?
yeah, I didn't read those, but tons and tons of people have talked to me about them.
Well, there was this one book called Last Act, and I was wondering if you had read it because it was about theater kids, and there was this one girl where there's like a gun with blanks.
Uh-huh.
Like there's a murder in a theater, and it's like, how did she do it? The gun was filled with blanks. Like maybe one of them wasn't a blank, and then it was like it's like a whole mystery around that. It's good.
Well, I think we're watching that whole thing play out right now with the Baldwin. Like what happened to that gun that it didn't have a blank in it, and I don't know. It looks like it was sloppy, whatever it was, all the way around. People should be more careful when there's live ammunition on a set. It's probably never a good idea.
Yeah, and like so it's, big question of like how could you do that? How could you swap out a real bullet for blanks? It looks completely different, like,
Although they were saying that the rounds, you can't really tell. You have to tap them and they rattle if they're a blank.
Interesting.
So I actually I was just in my bank parking lot earlier this week, and I'm like, oh my God, there's like a bullet lying on the ground. It's like a 9mm
Really?
hollow point, copper jacketed. It had been fired either and not hit anything, or just fired up into the air, or it went into something soft. But I think it probably it missed. Whatever happened, it missed. But it was kind of freaky to see it in my bank parking lot.
You're like, of all places,
Yeah.
why think? Yeah. And is that important? You live in Portland?
Yeah, I do live in Portland. I live in Southwest Portland. So I feel like Portland is a good balance between you're an hour and a half from the mountains and an hour and a half from the coast. So, and probably 2 hours from high desert country. So whatever you want, you can probably find it.
It's so nice. So, do you have, this is a question because I have a thing with poison. I like to write about poison. Do you have anything like that? Like a particular type of murder?
Oh, there's a great book called The Poisoner's Handbook that you should get.
Hmm.
Nonfiction book. I've seen the lady speak because I think she said you're a member of Sisters in Crime, and I think I've heard her speak at Sisters in Crime or
Okay.
someplace. So that one you should get. Poison. No, I don't know if I have a murder I haven't done yet. I feel like I've killed people in so many different ways, and I'm really tired of writing funeral scenes. I feel like I've written I've written even super crazy ones, where like somebody throws themselves into the coffin or whatever.
Mhm.
So it's hard to write in new ways. But I don't think I have.
Do you have a favorite, like particular murder type of murder that you like, murder method?
Um, I guess anything that would look tricky so that it could be seen in like two or three different ways. So I mean, to be honest, you and I both know, I mean, we are adults, that the real murders are probably two drunk people and one of them shoots the other one. And it's depressing. And now someone is dead. So
Yeah.
you don't, book murder and real murder, I think, are probably quite a bit different um, because they're usually not that hard to solve, and they're just, I don't know, sad. So and also in a book there's justice, and a lot of times there's not justice. And sometimes the not justice even goes the other way. Like there's a guy right now who is still in prison even after he has never admitted to his wife's death because he says he didn't kill her, and he will be let out if he would admit that he did it, but he won't. And it was all based on bite mark evidence, which is, if you think about it, you can see how it's very inaccurate. A bite mark, it's not like if you bite a person, they're not an apple. They're not going to have like not clay or something. And so the evidence was very messed up, and he shouldn't still be in prison. So maybe
Yeah.
when they all write about somebody who is innocent and trying to prove it, that would be an interesting book. Just be hard to figure out how to do it for teens, but maybe I could do that.
Do you think you'll always write for teens?
I like writing for teens. I wrote 12 books for adults before I wrote my first teen book, and I heard this news articles about teens who were being sent to overseas boot camps that were really terrible. And I thought, well, that would make an interesting book. I'll just do a book with a teenage main character, but a book for adults. And my agent was like, no, you've written a book for teens, and trust me, I sell lots of books for teens, and that's what it is. And then it turned out I really like writing for teens. Teens are they don't hide their emotions. So if you go and do school visits, like I do a lot, if they're bored, they'll show it. They'll be restless, they'll talk to each other, they'll poke each other. Adults who like you look like this, and adults who don't like you look like this. They look exactly the same. They'll just they hide it. So there's a lot of energy with teenagers and a lot of excitement, and maybe you've written the best book they've ever read, but maybe they've only read two other books or something, so the competition isn't too high. But I think secretly I am a seventh grader, so it fits well with me.
Same. My sense of humor has not matured since middle school. I don't know what that is, but I definitely I didn't get whatever the adult sense of humor is that you're supposed to get once you become an adult lady.
So, I
Um,
see the questions. Are we getting some
mhm.
questions?
Question.
Um,
Okay, so this is a good one for you. How has your writing changed from before the pandemic to now, and has it?
um, how has my writing changed? A lot of emotional stuff happened to me during the pandemic. I lost two friends,
Hmm.
one through suicide and one from cancer. So I think I think I'm maybe a deeper or more thoughtful person. Um, and partly during the pandemic, I used to really, my life revolved around jujitsu. And you couldn't roll in Oregon for a long time because it was just too close of a personal contact. And for a while, and then eventually we rolled in masks. And then eventually, like only a few months, I don't know when it was, we finally stopped. We were able to roll in like, with no masks. But so I don't know that my writing has changed a lot. I think I'm maybe more thoughtful now. That's it. How about you? Has anything changed for you?
I don't know if it's coming out any different. I definitely noticed that like in the last couple things I've written, I noticed that I've been really wanting to like connect with readers emotionally maybe more than I did before for some reason. Like I'm really craving that like emotional catharsis feeling at the end of a book. Like I really want people to feel like that catharsis that comes from either a happy ending or like I don't know how to explain it, but I've been looking for that more and like trying to figure out how to do that better in my work and give readers like a deeper emotional experience. I don't know why that is
No, I
what
hear you on that one. And then I see another one of our questions is if there was a movie or TV show based on any of your books, would it be Girl Stolen? Um, is been under option for it was actually almost became a TV show over on ABC, and then that didn't happen. But now somebody's trying to make a movie out of it. There's a director attached, and she clearly has a vision where I feel like she's reread the book more than maybe other people have in the past. And then Body in the Woods and Blood Will Tell. Someone's trying to make that into like a Netflix type show. So all
Hmm.
those things are a really long shot. But the nice thing is it takes 3 years to figure out they're not going to happen, and you have 3 full years of imagining how they could happen. How about for you, Wendy? Have you had any TV or movie interest yet?
Yeah, the Kill Club was under option and it was going to go to a movie, but that was right before the pandemic and everything kind of shut down. I don't think it's going to go now. But you know how it is. It's like they get to various stages of development. You never know what's going to end up happening. I don't know. And, you get bites, but that ends up not, who knows what will happen. But yeah, that's the closest I've come is that one.
And then I see favorite fan story from meeting readers of my books. A few years ago, I got a note from some girl, and she said that she had had a really terrible time in her life, and my books were getting her through.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
then I asked her more about it, and she had been at her house with her stepdad and her little brother, and it was a snow day, and her stepdad got up and started yelling at them to be quiet, and then he took out a gun and he was threatening them, and she was trying to call her mom, and he took her phone and he smashed it, and then she ultimately ended up getting away, and he killed himself and set their house on fire, so they lost everything. And I was like, I spent a lot of time talking to her, emailing with her teachers. She was actually wants to be a writer, and she was really resilient. But it just, I mean, to know that you're helping someone who's going through something so horrible and so unimaginable, um, and I haven't heard from her probably in a year, so hopefully she's still doing okay. She's maybe like college age now.
Did her little brother, is he okay?
Yeah, he was okay. I think it was super traumatic. They were all in therapy.
Nice.
Everybody was in therapy, and they were trying to build another house or find a place to live. It was pretty awful. So, and I hear from a lot of kids who have gone through awful things. You probably sometimes do too, Wendy.
Yeah, I remember I was doing early research for my first published book, and I had a psychologist tell me that, scary stories can be a therapeutic tool for people because sometimes what happens with trauma or with anxiety is your body gets stuck in this part of a stress cycle and can't finish it. So it can be therapeutic to go intentionally through a stress cycle of a scary movie, a scary book, a roller coaster, something that will take you through that cycle, but then finish it because your emotions and your hormones and your brain will go along for the ride and then finish it out and close that cycle that it's been unable to close on its own. And so when she told me that, I was just thinking about how, yeah, that makes so much sense just for me and for a lot of readers who you would think that because you've been through darker things, you wouldn't want to read darker stories, but sometimes they do, and they don't always know why they've gravitated toward that. And that kind of, I don't know, I really resonated with that explanation she gave me.
Yeah, I kind of related. When I started teaching Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and offering a class just for women, I didn't realize that a lot of the people who were going to show up were women who had been raped,
Yeah.
and that was not something I've experienced. And so they are looking a way to get kind of agency back in their bodies and to have an experience that's super physical but not emotional and not an assault. But is a lot for them. I think it's like I'm always like, you need to be in therapy too if you're working through this. But it's like exposure therapy
Mhm.
on steroids. It can be kind of tough. And then I see we have a question about dealing with heavy subject matter and why do we like to write for teens. I think there's always a way to approach things that are heavy um, and still reach teens. And also, teens haven't experienced a lot yet. And a book, I think, is a safe place to
Mhm.
think about things and experience things. How about you, Wendy, when you're thinking about your books?
I always go back and forth. Like on one hand, I want my books to be a safe place where teens know that certain things are not going to happen. And on the other hand, I want to make people feel seen and I want to talk about things I've experienced, right? So I kind of go back and forth between trying to strike the balance of like, I don't want to re-traumatize someone who's gone through something difficult, but at the same time I want to show people that they're not alone, right? And I don't know,
Right.
I kind of try to ride that line of like, you're not alone. I see you, but this is not a place where certain things are going to happen, and like, yeah.
I've always, even in all my stories, I've always chosen not to have a character be raped, but I've made it so that it makes sense that they're not raped. Like in The Girl in the White Van, there's a girl who's been kidnapped, and as a dog has bitten her face, and so she's horribly scarred. But
Mhm,
it made it to me that he would not find her attractive after this. So just
mhm.
trying, because I feel like, I don't know. I know most of my readers are middle schoolers, and I feel like that's a hard topic, especially since I'm not coming at it from anyone with personal experience.
Yeah,
That I don't feel comfortable writing about that for my readers.
yeah, I agree. And like for me being queer, my characters being queer, there's certain things that like I'll approach like emotional homophobia or like that type of thing, but I will never put like on page like physical abuse or physical bullying, that type of
Mhm.
thing. So it's like I try to have like a thing where it's like, I see you, I know this isn't easy, I know these things happen, but I'm not going to take you all the way into that dark room.
Right. Just like Frankie gets bullied in the book, but
Yeah,
it's not like she's getting beaten up in the parking lot or whatever.
that's what I try. I mean, I even struggled with that when I didn't even know if I wanted to do that, but I mean, I ultimately with when you're an author, you're kind of like, I am allowed to write about things I've been through. It's like it is part of what we're allowed to write about, but at the same time we have a responsibility to our younger readers too to try to approach things in a way that's not going to be like destructive. I don't know, it's hard with art, right?
Right. Right. We do the best we can. And then I
Mhm.
see the next question is about true crime media. Since we write in the mystery thriller space, does it influence us? And I actually have a book coming out next year called Girl Forgotten, about a girl who starts a true crime podcast about a girl who was murdered 17 years ago. And of course, she's going to find out that it is a little bit fresher. But I think almost all of my books start with something that really happened.
Mhm.
Um, the Girl I Used to Be, which was the finalist for the Edgar and won the Anthony. That book started with a real case in Washington that is still unsolved, where a girl turned up at a Kmart too young to even say her own name, and they found her mom's body later, and they thought she had been murdered by her dad. And so she was brought up being told, your dad killed your mom and dropped you off at a Kmart, and someday we'll get justice for him. And then they found a piece of one of the dad's bones in the woods where the mom's body had been found 30 years earlier. And they now believe both parents were killed by somebody else. So a lot of mine does start with like a true crime that I just find intriguing. And I think, well, what's the answer? And of course, the answer I come up with isn't the real answer. As last I heard, they were doing DNA testing on her remains again, just trying to see if they could come up with anything. How
Wow.
about you? How do you feel like all the true crime podcasts and stuff, the disappointing one that you listen to, do you feel like that's influenced your writing?
Yeah, I mean, my next book has a lot of true crime stuff, like discussion of the like morality of the way we consume true crime, and like I definitely have complicated feelings about that, especially growing up in LA where I mean, the way people consume. Did you see the Marilyn Monroe documentary?
Mm-mm.
The way we just consume like rabidly what happens to beautiful young women, the way we just like love it, and can't get enough of it. I think it's complicated because on one hand you have women who want to read and listen to these stories because they themselves, are trying.
Well,
Yeah.
it's mostly women like with Crime Junkie or My Favorite Murder or whatever.
Yeah, it's complicated. I think we all have complicated feelings about it. Yeah.
Who are some of the authors that have influenced us and whose work you always pick back up?
Mm.
I read all the time. So, like I'm reading Jennifer Egan's The Candy House right now. And so I think anymore, it's just little things. So I think that's a clever turn of phrase. This book here, I just finished it and I felt like I want to go back through it and think about how she did it. It was really interesting.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was a woman who was a PI, and then she got a case that really brought up some echoes from her childhood. And so it's a true story, but it's about a crime. It's got these past secrets, and also the author did jujitsu, so it was kind of like it hit all my buttons. I don't
That's
know. What about you? Is there something? Do you find yourself being influenced by other authors, or are there people you always pick up?
I've been really reading a lot of Taylor Jenkins lately because I've
Mhm.
been trying to up my game with as far as like that emotional stuff I was telling you. So I've been kind of devouring her catalog. I feel like she does that really well. And I've been weirdly on a romance kick. I don't know why I've been like reading romance novels a little bit more than usual.
Mhm.
So yeah, so I don't know. I just kind of I'm on a little kick right now. I think maybe because the last couple of ones I wrote were pretty dark, and so I think I'm looking for a little escapism there.
And then I see another question was, have you ever written yourself into a corner you can't get out of? I remember there was in Run, Hide, Fight Back, I wanted a character to go from one room to the next, and it had acoustical tile ceilings. So I asked a person who installed acoustical tile ceilings whether you could crawl on top of them, and you can't. They could only carry about 60 pounds.
Yeah.
He told me if I could get something that could go across some of those aluminum struts, it would space out the weight, and I made the character be very skinny, and I put
Okay.
her in a room where there was, like, a shelf that she could put over these aluminum struts, and I had her climb up there, and she was supposed to go over, and she was just like, "I'm not doing this, it's stupid." She refused to do it. I mean, I know our characters are just us, but it really felt like Grace was like, "No." And I don't know, I'd done all this stuff to make it happen, but I had to come up with a different way for her to get out of the room or find information. I can't even remember what I ended up doing, but I just remember feeling really stuck. I'm like, "Uh-oh, now what do I do?" Because that was my big idea that I had plotted and it didn't work.
What
How
did
about
she do instead? How'd she get out of there?
I don't even remember now. I just remember the feeling of frustration where I was like, "That's not gonna work." Also, I'd looked into whether you could crawl an event. Now, we've all seen every single movie, and that does not work. You make a ton of noise, and usually it's just gonna end in a fan. It's not gonna end in anything where you can get out of. They're not made like huge, like these people are constantly crawling in them, and there's lots of space above them. That actually doesn't work like that.
No, I always wondered about that. I was like, it just goes to a fan. Like,
Yeah,
what's gonna
and
happen?
it's thump, thump, thump. They're gonna be shooting that gun up into the ceiling and killing you.
Mhm.
I just watched 2 crawling in event movies recently, so I was laughing.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be able to track someone's progress like all the way across, like thunk, 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 thunk.
Right. I'm back because at the end of all of our virtual events, we do some rapid fire novel questions. And they're just silly and they're not meant to be overthought. Also, tonight's discussion was incredible. So thank you for letting everyone listen in. So some this or that's to start us off. Do you prefer a locked room mystery or a procedural thriller? And both of you should answer.
Uh,
You go first.
I'm gonna go with locked room for right now.
I'll go procedural.
Great. Are you more of an action writer or a suspense writer?
Hmm. Action.
I guess action.
Would you prefer something that's character driven or plot driven?
Plot, plot, plot.
Plot.
What music is on your writing playlist, if you have one?
Hmm. I have an Apple Music playlist, but I don't understand how it's working. So it's just whatever it thinks I'm gonna like, and sometimes it's right, and sometimes it's really, really wrong. So I was just listening to I just Alt J. So that's from the library, so that's why it's not a downloaded thing. How
I
about
have
you?
I have a new band I've been into called the Jacks. I like them a lot.
Oh, I think I've heard them.
They're good.
What is your coffee order at a coffee shop?
Oh, another author turned me on to getting flat ristretto shots.
Mm.
Um, and I will almost always do kids temp or tepid, or they always call it different things. But I want to chug it, and I cannot drink super hot coffee right away.
Um,
And usually non-fat unless I'm feeling like spontaneous.
Like go crazy, get that 2%.
Yeah.
I'm a cappuccino kind of person. I
Ooh,
think.
that's fun. Okay, last one. What are you reading right now?
I'm reading Candy House, and I just finished a graphic novel that is coming out in October called Numb to This by Kendra Neely. She was the survivor of one of the mass shootings.
Mhm.
So it's her experiences, and I'm going to try and get the word out on that book because I think it's important.
Wow.
I am reading The Restless Dark by Erica Waters, and it's awesome.
That is a great title.
She's so talented. I just makes me want to like shelve my laptop. Like, never mind, I give up.
I love The River Has Teeth, and then as soon as the Restless Dark arc got here, I snapped it.
Isn't it pretty?
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
Yeah, she's really talented.
Oh, wow. Shout her out in the comments. Thank you both so much for being here. April, congratulations on Two Truths and a Lie. We're very, very excited to have it here in the store. If you do not yet have a copy, we have them here at the Novel Neighbor. Please come pick yours up. We also have copies of She's Too Pretty to Burn. We will soon have copies of Dead End Girls. And thank you all so much. I really appreciate this conversation, Wendy, and this conversation, April, and hope that you have a wonderful evening. Thanks, everyone who watched. And
Okay, thank you.
we'll talk to you soon.
April.
Bye-bye.